Revan, the greatest knight of the Jedi Order, has disappeared. Though the Republic has a much-needed peace for some decades after he vanishes, it was not to last. For now the Sith Emperor Vitiate, hidden with his empire on Dromund Kaas, looks to strike against the Republic. Thus begins one of the most fabled eras in the history of the Star Wars universe, for there were to be two cataclysmic wars that devastated the Republic, the Great War and the Galactic War. This time is most well known to Star Wars fans on the basis of the widely popular MMO Star Wars: The Old Republic video game, which covers the Galactic War. You may remember this game from the famous cinematic trailers released by Bioware, some of the most compelling and aesthetically pleasing Star Wars footage we have today. In this video, we will cover the history of the first major conflict, the Great Galactic War, and the Cold War that followed it. This will serve as a lead-in to the Old Republic video game, which takes place when the second conflict, the Galactic War, starts. Consequently, if we use the cinematics as a scale, we will only cover the events of Return, Hope, and Deceived in this video. There will be several other sources I use for the lore and story in this video, and I'll be sure to put them all in the description below. Let's get into it. The Republic settled into a time of peace after the disappearance of Revan the Redeemed. More worlds joined the Republic in its Senate, but in the meantime, the Sith Empire was also growing. The Sith Emperor sent agents into the Republic and even the Jedi Order as preparations for war continued. One such spy was the Jedi Master Beryl O'Vare, who had Asan Gint as his Padawan. Gint was one of the most talented apprentices in the Order, and he and his master embarked on an ambitious mission to Yavin 4, intending to study the Sith artifacts there. They investigated the resting place of Naga Sadow, the reigning Sith Lord during the Great Hyperspace War. O'Vare and Gint battled the Massassi warriors guarding the temples, but were forced to flee deep inside Sadow's tomb. O'Vare would mysteriously return weeks later to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant without Gint, half insane, claiming his Padawan had died. However, 7 years later, Asan Gint returned to Coruscant, looking to kill O'Vare. Possessed by the spirit of Naga Sadow, he attacked O'Vare in broad daylight, but was cut down by his former master. The Jedi Council assumed all was well, but were unaware that O'Vare and his ancestors were Sith infiltrators, and his missions were instead on behalf of the Sith Emperor. For the Emperor sought to conduct preemptive strikes against the spirits of the ancient Sith Lords, to ensure no beings of darkness would oppose him upon his return to the galaxy. At long last, after centuries of meticulous planning, the Sith Emperor deemed his forces ready to attack the Republic and its Jedi. He commenced the Great War, a conflict that would span decades and kill thousands of Jedi and Sith alike. It began with a lightning assault on the Outer Rim, with the Sith overwhelming the Republic in massive, unprecedented numbers, spreading panic and fear. Sith ships first appeared in the Tingle Arm, and the Republic initially sent out emissaries to determine their origin and intent. The ships were destroyed, barely having enough time to transmit terrifying images of the Sith's might back to the Republic before their destruction. The Aparo sector was attacked, and it was revealed the Sith had already bought off the governments of several planets in the area, including Cernpedal, Belkadan, and Ruria. The Republic fleet there was put under great duress, and many ships were frantically sent to aid in the fight. As a result, only a light contingent of ships was left behind to guard Korriban, the ancient homeworld of the Sith. It was there that Jedi Padawan Satele Shan, a descendant of Revan himself, and her master Kal Kendarak were investigating the arrival of a smuggling ship. They detained its captain Nico Okar, but then Satele was struck by a sense of strong foreboding. Then, out of hyperspace, Sith dreadnoughts fell upon the station, opening fire. Darak declared the Republic must be warned as a desperate defense of the station commenced. Okar, the Jedi, and a Republic trooper named Jace Malcolm fought their way to Okar's shuttle, the only ship fast enough to outrun the Sith cruisers. They made it to the hangar, but then a Sith fighter dropped in. The Sith Inquisitor Vindican and his apprentice Malgus strode out to confront Satele and Darach. Darach took Vindican while Malgus squared off with Satele. Okar and Jace readied the ship as the Jedi and Sith battled. The ship took to the air, and Darach sent Satele ahead, telling her she was destined for a different path. Satele threw Darach her lightsaber as she leapt onto Okar's ship, and they blasted away. Darach turned to face Malgus and Vindican and put up a valiant fight. He managed to mortally wound Vindican, but Malgus proved to be a formidable foe with considerable strength and power, and overcame Darach. Satele sensed her master's death in the Force as she escaped to hyperspace. Malgus walked over to his dying master and ended his life with a single strike. The Sluice sector was attacked next, and many of the Republic shipyards were destroyed. The Republic was on the back foot, and an emergency meeting was summoned on Coruscant to mount a defense. But many senators were disgruntled, and several systems refused to lend aid to the Republic. The galaxy seemed to fall into a panic state of individual defenses, every system for itself. The Sith Emperor had the full initiative and prepared for a push into the core. However, the Jedi and Republic military ignored the politics of the Senate and met the Sith in the Outer Rim, managing to slow their advance. The Sith forces attacked Bothan space, but were met by a fiery defense from the Republic fleet and obliterated. It was the first major victory for the Republic after 10 years of war, and at last galvanized many into joining the fight. A task force of Jedi remained on Botha Wui to prepare for the return of the Empire as the fleet sailed on for more battles. Soon enough, the Sith returned in might and landed en masse on the planet's surface. Jedi Master Beltha Lucis led a valiant stand against 50,000 Imperial troops. Countless Sith forces were killed, 10 for every Republic defender. But the Jedi and troopers were slowly cut down, refusing offers of peaceful surrender. Master Lucis and every last soldier were slain, but so grievous were the Sith casualties that they were forced to withdraw soon after. Despite this resounding moral victory, the fact remained that the Sith had conquered far too many systems in the early stages of the war. The Republic was fighting for survival, not the vanquishing of its ancient enemies. The Sith Empire then sent a force led by Darth Malgus to Alderaan, a key core world. In a devastating strike, Imperial forces swept through the planet and took the royal family hostage. Jace Malcolm and Jedi Master Satele Shan led the Republic counterattack. Shan had originally been sent to the planet to investigate for spies, but arrived too late. However, she was able to link up with Malcolm in the nearby mountains, where he had been forming a resistance group. They decided to ambush the Sith as they marched through the woods to Organa Castle. Malcolm charged Malgus, a Dark Lord of the Sith, single-handedly and only armed with a knife. He was captured and taken to be executed, but was saved at the last moment by the arrival of Satele Shan. She dueled Malgus, and after an evenly matched struggle, her lightsaber was cut in half. But then Malcolm charged Malgus again, and detonated a grenade in close quarters, sending everyone flying. Satele rose and force-slammed Malgus into a cliff. She sent a wave of energy at the Sith, causing him to be buried in rock. Malgus would survive, but the Republic was able to drive the Sith away from Alderaan, marking a key turning point in the war. But the Emperor had more cards up his sleeve. He turned to the Mandalorians, who now came to the forefront of the galaxy once more. A scattered people after the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War, Sith intelligence operatives now looked to reform the once proud people into a fighting force for the Empire. At the same time, many criminal organizations were remaining neutral in the conflict, where many Mandalorians worked as bounty hunters. Sith intelligence then turned to the gladiator arenas, and happened upon a young prospect. They manipulated the games and accelerated his rise in prestige. The Sith created a gladiatorial legend who was supposedly a new Mandalore, one who could unite the clans once more. As his fame grew, many Mandalorians came to his side. He called for the Mandalorians to take on the Jedi themselves, though at the behest of his secret Sith masters. The Mandalorians united and attacked the Republic, enforcing a tight blockade of the Hydean Way. The Republic supply lines were cut off, and the Jedi were forced to withdraw from their battles in the Outer Rim and confront the Mandalorians. They attacked the blockade, but were quickly and profoundly defeated. The Sith gained the upper hand in the Outer Rim again, and now the core worlds became threatened by hunger and disease. The Senate began to even consider surrender, but then something unexpected happened. For a smuggler named Hylo Viz, looking for immense rewards, organized an attack on the blockade herself. She led a small fleet of freighters from the outer rim to the edge of the blockade. The Mandalorians approached her cautiously, but then another small fleet of smuggler fighters dropped out of hyperspace and opened fire. The smugglers were outmatched, but the Republic was monitoring the situation and quickly sent aid. The blockade was broken, and Hylo Viz landed on Coruscant as an extraordinarily wealthy hero of war. She vanished back into space, and was presumably killed a year later by the Hutts. The gladiator Mandalore was eventually killed and replaced by another Mandalore. And the war continued, though over time the progress of the Sith slowed to a crawl. On the planet of Begarin, a large Sith army marches towards the capital. They are pinned down by heavy Republic fire, and the beleaguered soldiers await orders from a mysterious Sith warrior. The Sith, however, has infiltrated the governor's palace, who destroyed several prominent Sith statues while mining for gemstones. The Sith, one Teneb Kel, mercilessly kills the governor. The Sith win the battle, and Teneb Kel reunites with his slave Maggot. However, the Dark Council summons him back to Dromund Kaas to answer for several crimes committed by his master, Lord Califo. Meanwhile, in the Paragus system, Exile Kresh, a native Sith, disembarks her ship and heads to a cantina. She is haunted by a powerful dark presence in her mind, and is on the run from the Sith Empire's notorious bloodhounds. Several bounty hunters confront her, and Kresh falls to rage and sends them flying away. It is then revealed the voice inside her is her former master, the Emperor himself. Teneb Kel returns to Dromund Kaas, where the people are celebrating the recent victory of Lord Nankrang in the Mid-Rim. He appears before the Dark Council, who show him a beaten Lord Califo. Teneb Kel loves his master, who always appeased his thirst for knowledge, but is ordered by the Council to kill him. With his devotion to the Empire unwavering, without hesitation, Kel attacks. He overpowers Califo, but before he can land the killing blow, the Council stops the fight. Califo will be tortured to the point of death, and the Sith will extract visions of prophecy from his final moments of clarity. Teneb Kel is still technically an apprentice, but the Council deems he can be of use still as a blunt force weapon. He is then ordered to find Exile Kresh and kill her. Teneb Kel is ushered in for an audience with the Emperor himself, who in a resonating voice tells him to go to the Lenico system. A hand is placed on his head, and he passes out. Teneb Kel awakens a day later on a ship with Maggot, and immediately sets off for the hunt. Elsewhere, a Republic corvette cruises on the Rimma trade route. They are operating off intel from Exile Kresh herself, and have positioned her entire fleet based on her information of Sith positions. Consequently, they also seek to find her and verify her story. Teneb Kel travels to the Lenico system and speaks with Yaban the Hutt. Several soldiers attack him, but Kel easily kills them all, impressing the crime lord. He asks for information on Exile Kresh, but learns nothing. She has not been on any of the 4 colonies he has searched, and the planet of Lenico itself is dead on the surface. Kel dismisses Maggot for the night, and breaks into a nearby compound. There, a security droid detects his intrusion and begins to revive Kresh, who is revealed to be in a self-induced comatose state. Meanwhile, an undercover Jedi Padawan in the colony also learns of Teneb Kel's arrival. It is revealed that through his vast powers, the Sith Emperor was able to see through Exile's eyes. To hide her thoughts, she put herself in stasis, and decided to wait for the hunters of the Emperor to find her instead. Teneb Kel confronts her, and she blasts him with Force Lightning. He hopes that by killing her, he may become the next apprentice of the Emperor. Exile Kresh, however, is a fierce opponent, and reveals the Emperor has hollowed her, replacing her strength with his own. Additionally, she claims to know a secret of his that not even the Dark Council members are aware of. Her power too much to overcome, Teneb Kel flees. Kresh remains determined to contain the Emperor within her as the compound around her begins to self-destruct. Kel barely makes it back to his ship in Maggot, and they take to space as the colony loses its structural integrity and falls down to the surface of the planet below. Kresh watches the flaming wreckage, then flies away. A badly wounded Kel and Maggot, however, are now stranded on Lenico and running low on rations. Left with no choice, Kel believes that he must make the dangerous trip to the surface to salvage supplies from the ruins of the colony. Landing on Lenico, he is immediately buffered by dust storms and attacked by monstrous creatures. His wounds from the battle with Kresh reopen, but survival is the only thing on his mind. Meanwhile, Maggot remains on the ship for repairs, and is shocked when he is confronted by a robed figure. And as Teneb Kel meditates using the teachings of Califo, through his last reserves of strength and fear, he conjures a phantom of exiled Kresh. She tells Kel that Lenico was where she first learned of the Emperor's true goals, and made the decision to betray him. The native tribespeople, also in Kel's vision, then show him what Kresh saw. For the Emperor plans to create his own children, manifestations of his power and solely his will. Exiled Kresh was designed to be the first of these children, and she now looks to stop him from making any more. Back on the ship, Maggot converses with the Jedi Padawan, who asks him why he serves someone who treats him almost as a pet. Elsewhere, Kel is then shown a vision of his own future, chained to the will of the Dark Council and forced to serve as their beast. Kel turns to a dark, armored figure who Kresh then tells him is his only escape from the vision. The figure tells him he is Darth Thanaton, and that the vision cannot be avoided. It is Kel's future, but he rejects it. Thanaton then electrocutes him with lightning, shocking him out of the vision. Kel awakens and is immediately attacked by a warrior with a lightsaber. He is Jurban Hulis of the Jedi, and offers Kel information on Kresh in exchange for his help in saving refugees from the colony. Kel agrees to the terms, and helps rescue Minnie from the wreckage. He returns to the ship, where Maggot bids a friendly farewell to the Padawan, who still urges him to claim his freedom. Kel, however, arrives and stabs the Padawan through the stomach, killing him. He brings parts for Maggots to repair their ship, and tells them they are leaving for Korriban and the Sith Academy. Meanwhile, the Republic fleet continues to maneuver into position, poised to strike at Korriban. This is Kresh's plan, to expose the weaknesses of Korriban's defenses. The Academy will be destroyed, and the Emperor will be denied of his children forever. Battle thus breaks out near Korriban space as Kel also drops out of hyperspace. He orders Maggot to take them to the Academy, also telling his slave to prepare for increased responsibility should Kel emerge victorious. Maggot is then told that he is to be freed if Kel dies. Kel lands by the Academy and makes for the tombs of the ancient Sith Lords. He finds exiled Kresh once more, who plans to utterly destroy the Academy and the Emperor's children. Already viable candidates have been gathered onto the planet, with machines ready to conduct rituals that will impart the Emperor's essence into their minds, effectively making him immortal. Kel battles her again, as Maggot decides to leave the ship. Elsewhere, Kel asserts there is more to Kresh's plan, who is angry that she has been relegated from the Emperor's heir to a mere pawn. Then, Maggot appears and shoots her with a blaster rifle. However, he is then shocked with force lightning and falls into a smoking heap. Kel's rage deepens, but he is disarmed and held in a forced chokehold. Kresh moves in for the killing blow, but Kel uses the force to ignite his blade on the ground. He sends it flying, stabbing Kresh in the back. As she falls, she hears the Emperor mocking her in her head. Kel stands over her body and decrees that in the future it is inevitable the Emperor will have his children. An alive Maggot then rises, and in his native language decrees himself a free warrior. Kel, however, does not understand there is more to his servant than appears on the surface, and instead offers to talk more on the ship. However, Kel knows that Maggot overheard the revelation of the existence of the Emperor's children. Knowing that this must stay a secret for his future plans, as they walk back to the ship, he draws his lightsaber and kills Maggot. The Republic assault on Korriban fails as Kel departs the planet. He returns to Dromund Kaas, having succeeded in his assignment to kill Kresh. However, Kel refuses to bow to the Dark Council, stating he no longer fears death. He instead offers to tell them what he knows of the Emperor in exchange for being made a Dark Lord and given the title of Darth Thanaton. The campaign of the Sith Emperor, though it had conquered half the galaxy, was stalled. After 7 more years of war, the Sith then took the Republic unawares by proposing terms of peace. The beleaguered Republic had no other option, for the war was deemed unwinnable. The Republic and Sith met on Alderaan to discuss a ceasefire. But the Republic was deceived, for the Sith had another play to make still. In the ship Fat Man, the pilot Zirid breaks through the atmosphere of Ord Mantell. He works as a smuggler for the Exchange, and was previously a pilot for Havoc Squad commandos of the Republic. As he approaches the surface of the criminal world, Zirid begins to search for his destination, a strange, remote island where he is supposed to meet a contact named Origo. Everything seems to be going smoothly, but he remains uneasy. The mission cannot go awry, as Zirid needs the credits for medical treatments for his daughter and to pay off the exchange for Fat Man. Zirid lands and checks his cargo of munitions, noting several cargo straps that come loose from a crate of grenades. 3 men approach him, and he begins to worry they may have killed the actual Origo and come in on the drop. They talk for a bit, then Zirid moves like lightning and stabs one in the throat with a knife. He then draws his blaster and shoots the other in the chest as the third dives away for cover. More men stir in Origo's ship in the distance, and Zirid turns and flees. He barely manages to make it on board and take to the sky, but the crate of grenades comes loose. It slides out the landing ramp and onto the ground below, and Zirid turns his ship around to see the attackers gathered around it. He opens fire on the crate, causing a large explosion that kills everyone nearby. Elsewhere, far away in the galaxy, a Sith Lord strides confidently towards the doom of the Republic. In the heart of Coruscant itself, Darth Malgus has landed and now walks in its streets. Sky rises, bridges, lifts, and plazas cover the entire surface of Coruscant to a height of kilometers. All of it the trappings of a wealthy, decadent civilization, a sheath that sought to hide the rot in a cocoon of duracrete and transparasteel. But Malgus smelled the decay under the veneer, and he would show them the price of weakness, of complacency. Soon it would all burn. Long ago, Malgus had had a vision on Korriban that showed him the fall of a galaxy-wide government. He has come to believe that he is thus destined to be the Sith responsible for the fall of the Republic and the Jedi. As he walks on towards his destination, he is accompanied by Alina, a beautiful Twi'lek who calls him by his birth name of Baradun. He had rescued her long ago from a life of slavery on Geonosis, and now feels a deep attachment to her. Malgus then receives a message from his Mandalorian agent, informing him the planet's defense grid has gone offline. Another message comes from a dropship, stating it will arrive in 90 seconds. Malgus comes before his destination, the Jedi Temple. Without hesitation, he walks forwards, passing statues of deceased masters of old, including Odon-Ur, Uru, and Arca-Jeth. The temple is lightly guarded, as many of the current masters are on Alderaan. For at the same time as Malgus's operation, there are currently peace talks ongoing between the Sith and Republic towards ending the Great War. Only the Sith, however, know the talks are a sham. Malgus approaches the temple, and 3 Republic soldiers draw in to stop him. Meanwhile, Jedi Knight Erin Lanier attempts to meditate on Alderaan but finds herself restless and sensing a strange doom creeping up on her. Remaining centered is sometimes difficult for her, for she has the affinity to form strong emotional bonds and empathize with the feelings of others. She waits with fellow Jedi CEO outside the negotiation room, where Masters Darnala and Satele Shan are deep in talks with the Sith delegation. And on Coruscant, Malgus draws his lightsaber and cuts down the guards before him. He and Alina walk into the temple, and several Jedi appear to confront them, with one being Master Ven Zalo. In his mind, the countdown continued. The space between him and the Jedi diminished. The power within him grew. Jedi Master Ven Zalo, also the former teacher of Eren, stands in front of Malgus and looks him in the eye. The ticking of Malgus's chrono echoes in the silence, and then the dropship closes in on the temple. Facing the door, all the Jedi except for Zalo panic and step back as the ship crashes in through the front entrance of the temple and skids to a fiery stop behind Malgus. Neither he nor Zalo have moved yet, but the Jedi Master stirs when the ship's ruined doors open and reveal 50 Sith warriors. Lightsabers hum, and a smile comes to Malgus's face. The sound heralded the fall of the temple, the fall of Coruscant, the fall of the Republic. Meanwhile, Xandret exits the atmosphere of Ord Mantell and contacts his handler, Orin. He tells him of the ambush, and Orin seems to be greatly displeased. Xandret is then ordered to carry out several spice runs to recoup the losses, which have added to his considerable debt to the exchange. The attack on the temple unfolds as on Alderaan, Eren is struck by a nauseating wave of emotion. Master Ven Zalo rallies the Jedi, and dozens rush out to fight the Sith attackers. Their silent charge meets the thunderous roar of the Sith, which include Lord Adras, a subordinate to a political rival of Malgus. Malgus feels the dark side fill him with power and perception, and his wrath falls upon the Republic soldiers, as Alina also fights nearby his side. Jedi and Republic soldiers fall before him as he seeks out Master Zalo, who he perceives to be the most dangerous opponent in the battle. He at last finds him, and Adras attacks the Jedi in an attempt to steal the glory. But he is thrown aside by the powerful Zalo, who also deflects several blaster bolts back at Alina, who is hit and falls. Malgus calls Adras off, and filled with rage, powers towards Zalo. Amidst the battle, they stare at each other once again, knowing their opponent is no ordinary enemy. There was only Malgus and his rage, and Zalo and his calm. They then explode into action, with Zalo falling into defensive actions and parrying every single one of Malgus's vicious attacks. Malgus kicks Zalo, sending him flying. He throws his lightsaber at the Jedi, then blasts him with force lightning as he leaps to dodge it. Malgus leaps forward, recalling his blade and preparing a finishing two-handed stab. Zalo rolls away at the last second, then launches a flurry of attacks at Malgus. After a furious exchange, however, Malgus stabs Zalo through the stomach, and in the reflection of the Jedi's eyes sees the temple burn. And on Alderaan, a spasm of pain shocks Eren as she senses Master Zalo fade from the Force. She instantly knows the Jedi have been betrayed, and with a cold fury turns to face the opposing Sith guards waiting outside the negotiation room. She unleashes a devastating attack on the Sith, who reel away. Eren is then stopped by Master Darnala, who emerges with Senator Amris and Jedi Knight Theron Shan. The Senator and Satil look stunned and dazed, and Eren is shocked as a calm Darnala tells her Coruscant has fallen to the Sith. The Sith negotiator, Lord Barras, appears with a look of smug haughtiness. To the chagrin of the Jedi and Senator Amris, the negotiations for peace will continue, but the humiliated Republic will inevitably be forced to settle for highly unfavorable terms. Malgus stands victorious in the ruins of the Jedi Temple, having lost all but a score of his warriors. Lord Adras also survived, but is a problem that must be dealt with in the future. Alina is alive, and Malgus must continue to maintain the delicate political balance of their relationship. He cares deeply for her, but for the sake of appearances must remain in a position of power and control. In the skies above, the fleet of Darth Angral, Adras's overseer, attacks Coruscant, and Malgus then coldly dismisses Adras. As the surface is bombarded, Malgus escorts Alina to medical care. He detonates several bombs in the dropship still inside the Jedi Temple, bringing it down. Meanwhile, the Republic delegation remains in a state of shock. Eren reveals she sensed Master Zalo's death and believes they should not surrender Coruscant so easily. But the defeated attitude of her fellow Jedi astounds her, for though they had been deceived by the Sith, Eren feels a burning desire to fight them and deliver justice. Anger washes over her, but she is talked down by Darnala, who insists the negotiations must continue. Elsewhere, Xandret flies to the Volta system, commencing his life as a spice runner. On a holo, he sees a newsreel of the Jedi and Sith delegations beginning negotiations on Alderaan. Surprisingly, he recognizes Eren, an old friend of his who he had served with on Balmorra during the war. Then, Orin patches in, this time with a new job but to Coruscant. Zirid learns of the surprise Sith attack, but this new mission has the potential to completely clean his debt. However, he will have to drop off Eng Spice, a highly addictive strain in massive demand. It will be considerably more dangerous than his other drops, but Zirid is left with no other option but to agree. The pain of Zalo's death continues to rack Eryn, and she becomes assured the Jedi and Senate would only end up accepting unfavorable Sith terms. It would be a betrayal of Zalo and the Jedi who died in the temple, and now Eryn's mind turns to vengeance. She begins to harbor thoughts of revenge, to find Zalo's killer and learn his identity. The night is restless for her, as the doom of the Republic and Jedi draws ever nearer. A sudden flash of inspiration strikes her. If she can get to the ruins of the temple, she may be able to find footage of Zalo's murder and gain closure. Moving quickly, Eryn jumps off her balcony and makes for her ship. She abandons the Jedi Order and embarks on a vendetta of revenge. Eryn races to the Essene spaceport, but encounters fellow Jedi Knight Volin Sor and his Padawan there. As for Malgus, he remains at the ruins of the temple, a deep longing for conflict burning in him. He deems the waging of battle necessary to his nature and the Sith's, but now wonders what will come next. Malgus awaits for the raising of Coruscant to begin, but instead the Sith ships above seem to withdraw, rather than destroy the crippled Republic. His second-in-command hails him, informing a furious Malgus that Darth Angral has ordered the Sith fleet to stand down until the conclusion of peace talks on Alderaan. His anger builds as he takes to the skies, noticing the surface of the great city planet has been damaged, but not annihilated to the extent he had envisioned. Malgus cannot fathom the Emperor's logic to spare the planet, and the decision to negotiate with the Jedi. For such was the sheer size of Coruscant that the planet had to be either returned to the Republic or utterly destroyed. Peace, he said, the word a curse. Elsewhere, Zirid begins his descent into Volta and receives a large first payment from Orin, which he had negotiated for owing to the danger of the current job. However, on the surface it turns out the Hutts have sent an agent named Vrath to track the Fat Man. The Hutts are trying to muscle the exchange's Eng Spice out of Coruscant, and though Vrath does not know Zirid's identity, he still has a ship to look for. Malgus visits the Senate building, demanding an audience with Darth Angral. He storms into the former Chancellor's office that Angral has commandeered, asking why the peace negotiations are continuing despite the Sith's insurmountable advantage. Adras then appears, an unexpected variable in the conversation. After some political jousting, Malgus deduces that Adras is making a power grab to push Malgus down, and Angral has agreed to turn a blind eye. Adras reveals that Alina was denied Sith medical care owing to her status as an alien, and Angral and Adras begin to press Malgus for more information on her. For attachments of love and passion, particularly to aliens, are looked down upon by the Sith. Malgus is then dismissed, furious at his tenuous political position and feeling powerless to prevent himself from sliding. Malgus flies to the medical facility where Adras supposedly sent Alina. He blasts away an angry crowd with a powerful scream, and storms inside to find her. Upon reuniting with Alina, he realizes the conundrum he is in. She has undeniably proven to be a political weakness for him, but at the same time is deeply important to Malgus. Though he cannot and will never openly admit it, Malgus loves her. Back on Alderaan, Volin confides to Eryn that he too does not agree with the Council's decision to continue negotiations. Eryn senses a growing danger, for the Jedi Order was now in a dangerous position and poised to break apart. She knows her decision must be hers and hers alone, and cannot be the catalyst for another schism. Eryn talks Volin down, and moves on to her ship. As a final act as a Jedi, she sheds her robes of the Order. Volin and his Padawan look on, knowing the symbolism behind the gesture as Eryn takes off. Zirid lands at the docks of Yinta Lake, and is immediately tracked by Vrath. He walks towards his home, looking to reunite with his daughter Ara. Zirid first makes a stop to buy a hoverchair for Ara, who lost her legs in the explosion that crippled her and killed Zirid's wife. He then heads to Carson's Park, and meets up with Ara and his sister-in-law Nat. He He sees Vrath and feels something is off about him, but cannot place exactly what. Aaron charts a course for Volta, knowing it is a matter of time before her disappearance from the Order is noticed. She begins to search for Zirid Kor, an old friend of hers from the military. Aaron finds Nat's address in Yinta Lake and sets out to find Zirid. Meanwhile, Zirid drops off Ara and Nat at the rundown apartment. He cannot shake the strange feeling he got from the man in the park, and stays in the hallway and surveys the stairwell. A cloaked figure suddenly appears and rushes towards the apartment. Zirid intercepts them, and it turns out to be Aaron. He also hears the footsteps of another figure, but cannot find them. Zirid and Aaron reunite and then head towards the spaceport, tracked by Vrath and his team. He is shocked to learn that Aaron has gone AWOL, and needs to make it to Coruscant as well. Her eyes are cold with anger, and though disturbed, he agrees to take her. Then, a message from Oren arrives, informing him that Aang Spice has been transferred onto the Fat Man and is ready for the run. Elsewhere, Malgus and Alina return to his cruiser Valor, where Malgus receives the demeaning orders from Darth Angral to command the blockade of the hyperspace lanes. And in the spaceport, Zirid and Aaron play a dangerous game, trying to remain inconspicuous from their followers while making it to the Fat Man. Vrath, realizing the cargo has been snuck on board without him realizing, orders his team to move in. A firefight breaks out, and Zirid is shot in the chest and shoulder, but is protected by his armored vest. As they flee to the ship, Aaron is also shot in the calf. However, they are able to take to the skies, escaping Vrath and his team. Zirid patches in with Oren and learns of Vrath's allegiance with the Hutts. Now, the main issue is figuring out how to bypass the Imperial blockade of Coruscant. In an unorthodox move, Zirid sets out for the Kravos system, on the fringes of Imperial space. He plans to piggyback on an Imperial ship's hyperspace jump. The Fat Man will go cold except for its thrusters immediately out of the jump, and hide in the Imperial ship's shadow. However, Vrath flies to Coruscant right up to the Imperial blockade. His ship is taken, and he asks to speak with the Sith commander. It is revealed that Vrath is a formal Imperial sniper, and soon he is summoned to the Bridge of the Valor to speak with Darth Malgus himself. The powerful, formidable Lord of the Sith questions Vrath, who tells him of Zirid and Aaron's impending attempt to run the blockade. Meanwhile, Zirid and Aaron make the hyperspace jump, and barely manage to attach the Fat Man to a large cruiser. However, Malgus is now aware someone may be trying to break his blockade, and has ordered for closer searches. Several shuttles close in on the Fat Man, and Malgus soon detects the ship in hiding. He sees an opportunity, knowing that Aaron's presence as a Jedi could complicate negotiations. Malgus hopes this will reignite the war, and personally hails Zirid and orders him to power off his ship. A defiant Zirid, however, cuts off Malgus and sends the Fat Man into a series of dizzying spins. Malgus pursues them in the Valor, looking to capture the Jedi alive. He learns of Aaron's flight from the Jedi, and even sympathizes with her reasons, as his own disillusionment with the Empire continues to grow. Though Angral orders him to destroy the ship, Malgus continues to try and capture it with a tractor beam. Desperate to make it to Coruscant, Zirid hurls the Fat Man towards the surface. However, they take heavy fire and are forced to crash land. Malgus senses they both survived and sends Vrath down to the surface as well. He is told payment will be sent, but he cannot leave Coruscant and is effectively stuck. The Fat Man enters freefall as it breaks through the atmosphere, and Zirid passes out. Aaron channels the Force to slow their fall, and they somehow manage to survive. Vrath is also sent down to a spaceport on Coruscant, where he resolves to keep a low profile until the peace negotiations finish on Alderaan. Meanwhile, Malgus decides to search for Aaron below, and learns that she is likely searching for him in a quest of vengeance. Zirid and Aaron walk on the surface of Coruscant under a sky filled with Sith Imperial fighters. Aaron tells him she will help him find his daughter and protect her from Vrath in the exchange, if Zirid in turn assists her in getting to the Jedi Temple. Elsewhere, Malgus sends Alina on a mission to capture several prisoners and important pieces of tech before setting out to hunt the rogue Jedi. As Aaron and Zirid continue on, she feels a looming sense of dread in the air, a tension palpable after the unprecedented Sith invasion. They find an abandoned speeder and head to the temple, only to discover it in ruins. Grief and pain shakes Eren again, and she insists they find a way underneath the temple to locate its surveillance networks. However, to do so, they will have to travel through the works. Malgus descends to Coruscant, still furious at the decision of Angral and the Dark Council for deciding to pursue a settlement with the Jedi. Peace was a mistake. Peace would cause the Empire to drift into decadence, as had the Republic. Peace would cause the Sith to become weak in their understanding of the Force, as had the Jedi. No, peace was atrophy. Only through conflict can potential be realized. He orders his pilot to set a course for the ruins of the Jedi Temple, where he looks to confront Eren. Xiorid and Eren, meanwhile, have entered the vast complex of the Works, a massive industrial maze of mind-boggling scale. They find T7, Master Zalo's former astromech droid. It gives Eren her master's lightsaber, retrieved from the scene of the battle. Eren believes it is a sign from the Force that her path is the correct one, and T7 guides them the rest of the way to the lower levels of the temple. They find backup surveillance footage and see a recording of a dark-cloaked figure and a Twi'lek woman walking through the temple doors. Eren watches as Master Zalo then confronts the Sith, who she cannot identify. Then, the Sith discards his cloak, and they at last recognize the killer of Master Zalo as Darth Malgus. Tears flow down Eren's face as she watches Malgus stab Zalo again and again. She becomes determined to get on board Malgus' cruiser, and Xiorid reluctantly agrees to help her find a ship. However, he will not accompany her on her mission, as he must find a way off-planet to get back to his daughter after the failed Aang spice run. They leave the temple, and Xiorid sets off on his own to scout out a nearby spaceport. It is largely empty, but he then sees 3 Imperial shuttles, all seeming to fall under the command of Malgus' cruiser Valor. It is Alina and her team, and through his binoculars Xiorid is able to recognize her from the temple footage. Meanwhile, Eren, who has stayed behind with T7, decides to return to the temple and find the exact scene of Zalo's killing. Xiorid returns shortly after she leaves, and quickly follows after her. At the temple, Malgus waits for Eren as she returns to the ruins. They sense each other's presence in the Force, and from above Malgus channels his anger and leaps out of his ship. He falls upon Eren with a powerful roar, strong lightsaber blows raining down on her. Eren falls to the anger in herself and vows to kill the Sith. As they dance across the ruins, Xiorid arrives, now more concerned than ever over Eren's motives. Eren manages to wound Malgus in the side, but is hit in the head and sent flying. Xiorid arrives and urges her to flee with him, as he still needs her aid. After hesitating, Eren leaps on board, calling out to Malgus that she will first hurt him before killing him. She looked back one last time to see Malgus standing atop the ruined temple, his blade in hand, his cape fluttering in the wind. He looked like a victorious conqueror, and she hated him. As they fly away, Eren learns of Malgus' Twi'lek companion who Xiorid saw at the airport. They race away as elsewhere, Malgus feels a cold shock run through him as he realizes their target. Xiorid and Eren reach the spaceport as dawn cracks, and Xiorid worries over Eren and what she will do if she finds Alina. Malgus is also racing to the same spaceport, and receives news at last of the peace talks. A treaty will supposedly be signed soon, and Coruscant, to his dismay, will be returned to the Republic. A rage fills Malgus as he arrives at the spaceport. Inside, Xiorid and Eren trigger a false alarm of a gas leak, and look to steal a ship for Xiorid to leave the planet. He tries to convince Eren to let go of her anger and leave with him, but at that moment Alina appears with 2 soldiers. A battle breaks out, and the soldiers are killed as Eren backs down Alina. Xiorid watches as Alina is knocked down and turns to leave. However, by an unfortunate coincidence, the ship chosen by Xiorid is none other than Vrath's, who had been camping in the spaceport the entire time. He wakes up to find the rear door open and heads for the cockpit. Meanwhile, Eren does not kill Alina outright, and learns of Malgus' birth name of Veradon. In a moment of clarity, Eren realizes that killing out of vengeance would not achieve anything, and would instead defile the memory of Master Zalo. She knocks her out and returns to Xiorid. However, she then senses Malgus' familiar dark presence. Aaron urges Xerid to leave, and before he begins preparations to depart, they kiss. Xerid heads for the cockpit, then runs into Vrath himself. A new calm washes over Aaron as she prepares for another battle with Malgus, who is still grappling with his affection and vulnerability with Alina. As he arrives, his rage and hate buffets her like a storm, and she bluffs that she will kill Alina if Xerid's ship is not allowed to flee. Aaron draws 2 blades, hers and Zalo's, and duels Malgus once more. However, though she is a skilled duelist in her own right, Aaron is no match for the power and strength of Malgus' brutal fighting style. She takes a shot to the head and is blasted with force lightning, falling unconscious. Meanwhile, in the cargo bay of Vrath's ship, a vicious fistfight breaks out. Xerid manages to break Vrath's nose, but is hit in the throat. They break apart and clash again, with Xerid breaking Vrath's arm and throwing him into a wall, knocking him out. Xerid staggers over to the cockpit and begins to break through the atmosphere of Coruscant. Elsewhere, Aaron awakens to find Malgus standing over her with Alina in his arms. He returns her lightsabers and spares her life, as repayment for not killing Alina. Aaron manages to get to her feet and fly away with T7. Also in the air are Xerid and a captive Vrath. Vrath recalls Xerid's family, and a chill suddenly runs through the former soldier of the Republic. Knowing now what he has to do, he shoves Vrath out of the airlock, a murder in cold blood to keep Ara and Nat safe. Back on the surface, Alina awakens as Malgus acknowledges his love for her. However, at the same time, he accepts that she is a weakness he can never afford to have in the heartless world of the Sith. Malgus draws his blade and stabs her in the heart, killing her. A new purpose has been set on Darth Malgus, the manifestation of his disillusionment with the Sith Empire. His vision on Korriban had shown him a galaxy in flames, but it was not just the Republic that required cleansing by fire. Sometime later, in the dead of night, Malgus infiltrates an expansive citadel. He is hunting Darth Adras and sweeps aside his guards. He confronts Adras, who sends a deadly wave of lightning at him. However, Malgus spins his lightsaber and gathers the lightning and hurls it back at Adras. Rage fills the room as the 2 Sith duel, and Malgus decisively overpowers the weaker Adras. He reveals Darth Angral will be next, an incredibly bold stroke, but one he believes Angral will not be aware of until it's too late. Adras's end draws near, and his arm is cut off by Malgus. Malgus then force chokes Adras, cursing him, Angral, and the Emperor for seeking peace with the Jedi. Finally, in memory of Alina, Malgus grabs Adras by the throat and strangles him to death. And elsewhere, in a valley on Dantooine, Xerid has settled into a peaceful life of farming. He has sold Vrath's ship and its cargo after leaving Coruscant and picking up Nat and Ara. Now, he lives in his home and vineyard with his daughter, free at last. A strange ship then arrives, but it turns out to be Aaron, who has let go of her anger and hate over Zalo's death. She reunites with Xerid and meets Ara, who now has prosthetic legs, and the 3 begin a new life together. While the peace talks were unfolding on Alderaan, the Sith were planning their masterstroke. Darth Angral, at the head of a large fleet, attacks Coruscant while Lord Barras oversees negotiations with Jedi Master Darnala, Satele Shan, and Senator Amris. In the Senate chambers, Republic Lieutenant Tavis and Jedi Master Orgus Din finish a debriefing of a recent battle in the Minos Cluster. They leave to find Sith warships in the skies above them, and Angral's ship lands in front of them. Orgus battles Angral himself and is knocked down. But then a burning ship crashes into the Senate building, and he and Tavis flee to the Jedi Temple. Angral lets them escape, and breaks into the Chancellor's office and kills the leader of the Republic. The Jedi and Senator Amris become aware of the Sith's betrayal on Alderaan, and Satele draws her blade on Lord Barras. She is ordered to stand down, and it is decided by Master Zim on Coruscant the peace talks will continue. Meanwhile, on Dantooine, a mercenary for the Republic named Brayden is hunting the Wookiee Dalbora, a soldier for the Imperial Army. His Republic commanders bomb the base Dalbora is in, and he is thrown to the ground as Dalbora emerges from the wreckage and finds him. Lord Barras reports back to the Dark Council on Dromund Kaas, and on his way out of the chambers is attacked by Angral. Barras was following the Council's strategy, but Angral is furious he wasn't given enough time to exterminate the Jedi fully. They stand down as back on Dantooine, Brayden is taken prisoner by Dalbora, who decides to fly him to Korriban. Master Darnala and Satele Shan are sent to the Outer Rim, seemingly to keep them in the background of the unfolding conflict. Darnala is frustrated with the peace treaty and the Council's failure to foresee the Sith's betrayal. Satele, on the other hand, with her tremendous gifts in the Force, had sensed something was wrong the entire time. The prisoner transport ship Brayden is on is attacked by a Republic ship on its way to Korriban, as Darth Angral meets with several bounty hunters on Nar Shaddaa. It is coincidentally the same ship that Satele and Darnala are on, and it seems that already the peace treaty has been broken. Satele fights off Imperial commandos, but Darnala is captured and orders her to escape. Republic forces across the galaxy make preparations to withdraw, and on Balmorra, the Jedi Fortress Ghaul asks for permission to lead the last rescue mission of a Republic squad held in Imperial captivity. Despite being told to hold back, he disobeys orders and breaks into a workshop to free the soldiers. The fallout of the unfavorable treaty reverberates across the Republic, and the Jedi are told the Senate has delayed the reconstruction of the Jedi Temple indefinitely. Master Orgus Din, whose Padawan was lost in the Temple's destruction, is assigned to travel to Balmorra and defuse the situation there with Lieutenant Tavis. In Imperial captivity, Darnala is interrogated by the ship's captain, who asserts the Republic fired first. Brayden looks on from his cell, and Darnala then notices him. Using the Force, she frees him and asks him to pass on a message to Satele Shan and Master Zim. As Master Orgus and Tavis travel to Balmorra, by sheer coincidence they come across Satele Shan's escape pod, presently being harassed by a Mandalorian ship. They are able to rescue her, and news of the skirmish reaches Republic ears. Many senators are outraged and begin to call for war once more. Tensions begin to rise as Orgus and Tavis at last come to Balmorra. Battle has broken out there again, incited by the actions of Fortress Ghaul. Orgus confronts him and sends him to Dantooine with Tavis and Satele Shan to defuse the tension there, as the Imperials have refused to withdraw. On Coruscant, Master Zim receives a mysterious message asking to meet the Republic commander of the attacked ship at the ruins of the Jedi Temple. It turns out to be a setup by Brayden, who kills the commander. Zim attacks Brayden before he can relay the message from Satele, and in the resulting skirmish, Zim is killed. Brayden flies away from Coruscant, but is tracked by Dalbora as the Senate building is bombed. Satele Shan and Tavis arrive at Dantooine, as news reaches them of Zim's death. It is yet another complication, as the killer is mistakenly believed to be an Imperial agent. To the dismay of Satele, it seems that Republic forces are determined to continue fighting, a sentiment shared by Tavis and Fortress Ghaul. Ghaul then summons Tavis to the old ruins of the Jedi Enclave. Orgus on Balmorra is encountering a similar dilemma, but is then hailed by Senator Amris. Amris tells him Brayden is now a main suspect of Zim's murder, and if he is captured, the treaty can still be saved. And on Korriban, Lord Barras is stabbed in the back by an assassin presumably sent by Angral, but he survives and electrocutes the agent to death. It is revealed that Brayden killed the commander at the behest of a crime lord named Nock, who is in turn working for Darth Angral. He stole schematics from the commander to be given over to the Sith, and is now sent back to Dantooine. At the ruins of the Jedi Enclave there, Ghaul reveals that Brayden's bombing had targeted Imperial spies in the Senate, false senators who were supporters of the peace treaty. Also on the way to Dantooine is Darth Angral, who learns that somehow, rumors have begun to spread that Lord Barras is responsible for undermining the peace, despite him being the architect of the treaty in the first place. Angral turns around for Korriban, as Master Orgus finds Brayden on Nar Shaddaa. Darth Angral confronts Barras and battles his rival, but both stop upon realizing a common threat exists between their opposing schemes: the captured Darnala. Orgus brings Brayden, who has denied any involvement in the Senate bombing, to Satele. And on Dantooine, a miraculously alive Darnala appears before Tavis and Fortress Ghaul, and she is also accompanied by Dalbora. Darnala and Ghaul are set on eliminating Lord Barras, but Tavis is less certain of his stance now. They head to the underground crystal caves, where they encounter a Sith party including Angral and Barras waiting for battle. Satele also learns of Tavis's whereabouts from a destroyed droid, and sets out to find him and Gaul. She finds them in the caves, and is surprised to see Darnala battling the Sith already. It is then revealed the Sith Lords have correctly deduced that Darnala was responsible for the conflict erupting again. She had manipulated the Republic ship into firing on the Sith first in hopes of reigniting the war. They try to turn Satele to their side as Tavis is able to drive Angral to the ground and hold him at blaster point. Darnala urges him to finish Angral off, but Satele tells Tavis to stand down. An enraged Darnala then lashes out at Dalbora, who strikes her with a powerful blow. Darnala dies upon impact, and Angral rises to his feet and draws his blade. However, Barras tells him to stand down, and Fortress and Tavis are allowed to escape. Barras deduces that Satele is of the bloodline of Revan, and asks her to join the Sith. She refuses and leaves with the others. They return to Master Orgus, confiding only that the threat to the treaty has been dispelled, and it seems there will at last be peace. And elsewhere, a fleeing Dalbora wandering the plains of Dantooine is spied on by Brayden. Without hesitation, the bounty hunter pulls the sight on the Wookiee and kills him, at last claiming his target. Wim Nictor, a student at the Sith Academy of Odassar Foston, stands in the cold awaiting the commencement of the training duels. He is 17 years old and stares out at the haphazard layout of the ancient buildings. His blade master, Lord Shaq Weth, steps in front of some 700 students as the air crackles with anticipation. For today is the day Rance Lusk, the top acolyte of the academy, would challenge someone. The menacing Lusk steps forward in a cold silence, but surprising everyone, challenges Nictor. Nictor, to preserve the modest prestige he has among his peers, is forced to accept. The duel begins, with Nictor fighting off Lusk's formidable will in his mind as he defends the blindingly fast attacks hurled at him. Lusk is a powerful, fast fighter and soon disarms Nictor. He hears a voice in his head telling him to fall on Lusk's blade and end it all. Pain racks Nictor's body, and as he sees the eager faces of his peers looking on, hate grants him unforeseen strength. He staggers to his feet and walks away from the dueling circle, having suffered a humiliating defeat. News of Lusk's most recent victory spreads quickly, and another student named Jura Ostrogoth wonders when the next move will be made among the students. He then learns that Nictor has abruptly and mysteriously disappeared. It is the latest of several such incidents, and rumors have begun to circulate that they are by the hand of Lord Scabras for devious experiments. Jura and his companions Skopeek and Hartwig worry who will be next, particularly since Jura is a potential candidate for Lusk's next challenge. Skopeek coerces Jura to find out more information on the disappearances, citing a long-time debt. For Skopeek a while back had saved Jura from several bullies who filmed their abuses, and now holds the hollow recording over his head to maintain control over Jura. Meanwhile, Nictor awakens in a cage with no memory of how he got there. Then, Lord Scabras, head of the academy, appears before him. A stabbing pain erupts in his back and spreads throughout his body. Nictor then feels strange tubes sticking out of his vertebra, which seem to have pumped a strange red-yellow liquid into him. He then sees Scabras staring at a table, where there sits a Sith holocron and rows of pure black flowers. Scabras looks on him without pity, and crushes one of the flowers to make more liquid. Nictor is stabbed again, and the pain magnifies until he passes out. Elsewhere, two bounty hunters named Scarl and Dranok land at the Sith Academy, having fulfilled a mission for Scabras. Dranok prepares to betray Scarl and kill him once they have been paid, and begins to formulate plans as they both walk towards Scabras' tower. He enters the Citadel alone, finding himself in Scabras' personal laboratory. Dranok has brought the Sith the Murakami Orchid, but upon examining the other flowers around him, realizes he was duped by the seller. He does not have the real flower, something Scabras immediately picks up on when he arrives. Dranok is then given a tray, which when uncovered has the head of Scarl. He finds himself rooted in place, and is ordered to eat Scarl's head in order to leave. Dranok lunges forwards with a knife at Scabras, but is stopped in his tracks and force choked to death. Meanwhile, another student named Mana Rot suffers a failure training under Combat Master Zat Hraken. Rot is a less powerful student, but possesses a great cunning and ambition to surpass the might of Lusk. However, after the setback, he bounces back with a surprising display of skill that catches Hraken off guard. And far away, the Jedi Padawan Hestizo Trace wakes up suddenly, having heard an alarm from one of her flowers. She is a member of the Jedi Agricultural Corps stationed on Marfa, and can communicate telepathically with plants. Her Murakami orchid is in distress, and reveals that something is deeply wrong. Hestizo discovers the body of the lab director, and now knows there is an infiltrator in the lab. She is attacked by a whippet bounty hunter, who demands to see the Murakami orchid. The flower immediately wilts in his hand, and Hestizo reveals it needs to be near her at all times to avoid losing its powers. She is knocked out, and later wakes up in a trophy room of sorts, gagged and tied up. She is on board the whippet ship Miroka, and is able to find her orchid. The orchid reawakens upon Hestizo reaching out to it, and reveals their captor is named Tolk. Their ship lands, and she realizes they have come to the Sith Academy on Odassar Foston. Elsewhere, on the world of Geonosis, Hestizo's brother Rojo assists in an investigation of a crashed Sith warship on the planet. Searching the chasm in the wreckage, he discovers the ship hit an underground gas deposit, risking the chance of a massive explosion. Rojo finds Sith bodies, and through his unique force powers is able to relive their final moments of panic and horror. He moves on, but suddenly senses something new from his sister. Hestizo seems to have been abducted, and Rojo now senses a poisonous, evil presence and telepathically warns it to let her go. He leaves the crash site, determined to find his sister. Rojo visits her lab and discovers the Murakami orchid was also taken with her. Through surveillance footage, he is able to identify the Miroka, and through odd marks on the ship is able to trace it to the Quen space station. After further investigation, he at last figures out his adversary is Tolk, and that he was hired by Darth Scabrous himself. Meanwhile, Hestizo is brought before Scabrous, who eyes the orchid before turning to her with great interest. Tolk leaves them, and Scabrous takes the orchid over to a cage with nectar inside. He drops the flower inside the red-yellow fluid, but unknown to him or Hestizo, the student Juro Ostrogoth is also watching the events from the shadows. Juro was able to sneak into the Citadel, and watches as Nectar writhes in pain from his latest injection and then collapses, dead. And a horrified Hestizo then hears the orchid, calling out to her in pain as Nectar suddenly rises and sits up. The door of his cage flies off, and out crawls a foul creature, with black pupils that dart across the room. It is Nectar, yet not, for he has been resurrected from the dead. Scabrous tries to summon the creature to his side, but it lunges at him, knocking the Sith down and biting him in the face. Scabrous throws it away with the Force, and Hestizo flees for the turbolift. Nectar's body is hurled at Jura, and they crash and tumble together towards a window, knocking Jura out. Elsewhere, Mana Rot confronts Rance Lusk, having stolen 2 training sabers. He boldly challenges Lusk and tosses him a saber. Lusk refuses to engage him, but Rot then attacks with surprising speed. Lusk outclasses him handily, and then holds his blade at Rot's throat. Then, a window breaks from above them, and Lusk turns to see Jura and Nectar's bodies crash to the ground. Nectar inexplicably rises again, then turns and begins devouring Jura's mangled face. Lusk and Rat are speechless, and then Lusk shoves the smaller boy at Nectar and flees to the library, and Rat's scream begins to ring out behind him. Back in his tower, Scabrous tries to heal his wound and ignore the rage coursing through him. He feels venomous hate towards the Jedi who had managed to escape, and vows to make her suffer before dying. Scabrous also knows that time is working against him, and he may not have long before he transforms into a creature like Nectar. He leaps out the shattered window and begins to hunt Hestizo down. Hestizo, meanwhile, flees across the ancient ruins of the Academy, guided by the voice of the orchid in her head. She sees a group of students and a master, but one spots her and catches her, looking to claim glory for his discovery. However, Tolk then appears and knocks him out, telling Hestizo he needs to show her something. It turns out that Rot survived his fight with Nectar, and had managed to leap away and above the creature at the last moment. He had pummeled it with rocks, but it refused to die. Rot lost his footing and fell, knocking himself out. He now awakens badly wounded in the arm and with a bad concussion. Stumbling over to the library, he encounters another student named Kendra. The rest of the academy is eerily empty, as all the students have been sent to their dorms on the pretext of an unforeseen emergency. And elsewhere, Skopik emerges from the shadows to find a trail of blood on the floor. He follows it to his bunk, where he finds a mangled corpse. It turns out to be Jura, and it suddenly snarls and attacks him. He cuts off its head with a vent fixture, but the body then picks up its head and throws it at Skopik. He instinctively throws up an arm to protect itself, and it bites onto his forearm. Burning pain sweeps over him, followed by a black numbness that utterly erases his consciousness. Several students later find Jura's head, and are then attacked by a transformed Skopik. The dining hall is then locked down, sealing 120 acolytes inside. They are all attacked by more corpses, where the plague has begun to spread rapidly. Lusk is there as well, but he has instead slashed his wrists open and now screams at the monsters, asking them to transform him. Rojo then lands at the academy and moves towards the Citadel, searching for his sister. Elsewhere, Hestizo is shown the body of Nictor, pinned under several rocks. She and Tolk then see several of the creatures climbing towards them, having been seemingly summoned by an unseen force. Meanwhile, Kendra and Rot run into two other students, who are also clueless as to the events unfolding around them. They then find a surveillance droid, which has recordings of transformed acolytes appearing to build a wall of some sorts. A chill runs through them as they realize they are being trapped in. Hestizo and Tolk try to fight off the undead creatures, and Hestizo then commands the orchid, which is still communicating with her, to grow inside the monsters. Though it brings the orchid great pain, it grows in one of the creatures until its skull erupts, finally killing it. However, the orchid is now greatly weakened and stops communicating with Hestizo. Then, a massive black turret erupts out of the ground and opens fire, and Hestizo and Tolk flee. Meanwhile, Scabrous has found Tolk's ship, and now learns that Hestizo was spotted near the academy perimeter. He is also apprised by his droid of a rapidly spreading plague, and changes his strategy to meet Hestizo at the library and then flee the planet. Meanwhile, Rojo encounters the Blade Master Shaq Weth, who immediately attacks him. He is slashed in the ribs and falls back, and then a monster grabs Shaq Weth from behind a wall. The Blade Master's throat is slashed and his body is savaged. The creature looks up and screams, and is answered in full by a horde roaming the night. As Tolk and Hestizo look for somewhere to hide, they enter a Tauntaun stable. The lights suddenly go out, and shrill, piercing screams suddenly ring out, as if searching for something. Hestizo tackles Tolk to the ground, signaling him to be quiet. Dark forms then move past them, within arm's reach, but move on without finding them. They leave the stall, and find themselves, by sheer bad luck, near the Citadel again. Elsewhere, Lusk has not been affected by the sickness in the same way as the other students. While he is no longer alive in the traditional sense, the Orchid has enhanced his force abilities and changed his midichlorians. He knows the plague is the manifestation of Scabrous' research, for it was rumored the head of the academy was searching for the key to immortality. However, the sickness then speaks in his head, telling Lusk he will be the last, greatest organism of the dead at the price of his soul. Though Lusk refuses, he has no choice in the matter, and suddenly begins to scream. Rot and the other students manage to find a weapons cache with 3 lightsabers. Rot, Kendra, and a student named Mags all take one, leaving the last unarmed. As they set out, Scabrous ventures into the library, and summons the tree-like librarian Dale Liss. The Sith Lord is still fighting the effects of the sickness, and can feel the pain spreading across his body. He commands Dale Liss to bait Hestizo to the library by mimicking the Orchid's voice, and then bites him. As the librarian becomes infected, he starts a fire, burning the ancient books and archives. Hestizo and Tolk spot countless dark figures crawling over the Citadel, and Tolk is buried in the snow as one falls on top of him. He digs himself out as the two become surrounded. Hestizo is finally galvanized to fight as she recalls the words of her brother, urging her to live within the Force. Things begin to move in slow motion for her. and she moves like lightning, throwing several monsters aside. Everything and everyone else moves as if stuck in quicksand, and soon the monsters are all killed. Then she hears the voice of the orchid coming from the library. Rot and his companions reach the wall built by the monsters, which is made of debris and human remains. A swarm suddenly appears from the shadows and attacks them. They are overwhelmed, but then Combat Master Kraken appears and unleashes a storm of force lightning. The monsters are cooked in a heaping pile of flesh, but Rot is wounded in the arm. He hears a voice in his mind, and believing it to be the Force, draws on it for strength. But his chest then tightens, and he falls to his knees. The sickness has somehow managed to mimic the Force. In a penultimate moment of clarity, he could actually see a skeletal black fist clamping over his heart, squeezing it until the muscle burst. "Mine now," the sickness said. "Mine, body, and soul." A black euphoria washes over Rot as he transforms, terrible bloody tears streaming down his face. "I can scream now," he thought. "Oh, thank you. I will scream and they will hear me. Bless you, I can scream and they will know how it feels to have an entire galaxy spread open like an open grave at my feet." The thing that had been Mana Rot jerked its jaws wide. In that instance he saw, of all things, a pyramid, as black as the tide that had obliterated all conscious thought, a thing resting in a pair of pale hands. All at once he knew his place in the galaxy. He knew everything. Rot screams his last, and is blasted by Kraken with lightning, ending his world. And elsewhere, Hestizo separates from Tolk to head to the library, while the bounty hunter continues on to find his ship. He finds Scabrous' HK protocol droid, a hunter-killer. Tolk switches off its restraining bolt, coercing it to attack the monsters. It is revealed that one of the students is wounded in the neck, but it is unknown if they are infected or not. But then they split into a wide grin, attacking a student named Hartwig, ripping out his throat. Kendra decapitates him, and she and Mags butcher the bodies to ensure they don't resurrect. Then, Kendra slashes Mag's legs, immobilizing him and leaving him at the mercy of an incoming horde. Elsewhere, Hestizo wanders the library, searching for the orchid. She has not heard it for a time, but feels a dark danger lurking around her. Scabrous then appears, clearly infected but covered in medical equipment to delay the transformation. He reveals that he discovered the sickness from the ancient holocron of Darth Dreer. Scabrous tells Hestizo that Dreer, in his final moments after taking the elixir, planned to sacrifice a Jedi and eat their heart, infusing his blood with fresh midichlorians. This, and only this, would then grant immortality. Unfortunately for Dreer, he chose a Jedi with too low of a midichlorian count to fight the sickness and died. Scabrous intends for Hestizo to be his sacrifice, for she has a high enough midichlorian count. Then, headless bodies begin to crawl towards her, with dozens of small black flowers growing from them. They seem to be drawn to her, and Scabrous lets out a scream. They grab Hestizo and drag her down below to the secret temple of Darth Dreer. Meanwhile, Rojo has managed to track Hestizo to the library as well. He is stalked by the infected Dale Liss, and in a brief moment where their minds meld, he sees the Temple of Dreer. Fire then sweeps towards him, and Rojo is trapped in the grasp of the librarian. He fights his way free, and tumbles out of the fire to the temple below. Meanwhile, the mechanic Purgus Frode has commandeered the abandoned ship of the bounty hunter Dranok. However, he had taken out his flight computer before the plague spread, and now has no way to escape. Kendra then shows up in the hangar, and asks to be let in the ship. Frode opens the gangway to find her being held captive, having been somehow coerced by the Horde to convince him to open the ship. Frode watches as the monsters, which also now wield lightsabers, tear Kendra apart as he seals up the ship again. He manages to fly Dranok's ship a short ways away before crashing, and finds himself near the Mirocop. Hestizo wakes up as Scabrous prepares the sacrifice ritual. His flesh has begun to decay, peeling off his face, and he wields a traditional metal Sith sword. Scabrous brings down the sword to cut out Hestizo's heart and eat it in front of her as she watches and dies. He has gone utterly mad, and Hestizo falls into the Force once more. Calming herself, her bindings somehow just fall away, and she rises away from the tablet she was tied to. Histizo scrambles away as Rojo arrives and stands in front of her. Scabrous unleashes a feral scream and launches a vicious attack at the Jedi. They are evenly matched, but then Scabrous deactivates Rojo's lightsaber with a flick of his fingers. Rojo tries to dance away, but Scabrous lunges forward and slashes him open from neck to belly. A shaken Histizo then hears the orchid for the first time in a long while. She commands it to grow in memory of her brother, and then the now transformed Scabrous stops moving towards her. Green stalks erupt from its body, a black orchid emerging from its nose. Its head explodes, vines spewing from the skull cavity. They swarm towards Histizo, but she takes the Sith sword and hacks at the vines mercilessly, then stabs the body of Scabrous. It makes a last lunge at her, and she takes Rojo's lightsaber and cuts it to pieces. The fire from above reaches the temple, and Histizo begins to climb up the walls to escape. Hordes of monsters then show up at the top, and she loses her grip. As she falls, a monster grabs her by the throat and drags her into the mob. Then, blaster fire erupts around her, and a tow cable lowers from the sky above. She grabs it and looks up to see the Miro call. Tolk has returned for her, and the ship is being piloted by Purgus Frode. Unfortunately, the Academy's automated security system opens fire on them, making escape nearly impossible. They fly to the Citadel, where the HK droid leaves the ship to manually override the system. The tower is swarming with black corpses, but the HK droid manages to force the guns to open fire on the Citadel, destroying itself and the structure. Histizo then finds Tolk in the trophy room of the ship. To her dismay, he has become infected from the escape from the Tauntaun stables earlier. Tolk tells her to push him out of the airlock to prevent the plague from spreading to the rest of the galaxy. Then, a monster appears behind her, screaming. It is Lusk, and Histizo manages to fight the creature off. She shoves Lusk and Tolk out into the void of space, and returns to Frode in the cockpit. Histizo arrives back at Marfa, where she learns a second Murakami orchid has been brought to the greenhouses. However, she then makes the decision to leave the bubble of the greenhouse and return to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant to continue her studies. The pirate cruiser Auriga Fire, piloted by Jet Nebula, comes across a scuttled ship called the Cinzia. However, the first mate Shinko leads a mutiny against Jet, but first they must determine the nature of the other ship. A gruff voice over the comms refuses to surrender, and Shinko quickly prepares a boarding party. He plans to take the Cinzia and its cargo, leaving Jet to deal with the Republic in the aftermath. The Auriga Fire nears the Cinzia, and then Jet moves quickly. With his droid blocking the cockpit exit, he rolls the cruiser away from the ship, catching Shinko off guard. The Cinzia suddenly explodes, and Shinko then stands down, ending the mutiny. They turn to scan the debris field, believing the ship had self-destructed to protect its cargo. On the other side of the galaxy, the Padawan Shigar Khonchi walks through the lower levels of Coruscant. He has recently been rejected for Jedi trials to become a knight, with Master Nikhil Mobile finding him to be lacking in self-control and emotional discipline. The decision frustrates Shigar, who knows he is also looked on favorably by Grandmaster Satil Shan, his teacher. As he walks, Shigar then hears the sound of blaster fire from a nearby alleyway. Looking for a distraction, he turns to investigate the disturbance. Also in the same area is Lauren Moxla, who is investigating the building as well. The former soldier of the Republic enters as the noise dies down, and encounters a Mandalorian. He is looking for a woman named Lema Xandret, and just then Shigar arrives as well. The Mandalorian attacks them both and moves to flee. On the spur of the moment, Laren and Shigar decide to chase him together, but soon lose the Mandalorian. They return to the warehouse and investigate the battle scene, finding a single survivor belonging to the Black Sun crime syndicate. They learn the Mandalorian is Dao Stryver, and the survivor utters the last word Cinzia before he dies of his wounds. Shigar and Laren then leave the warehouse before the local Justicar militias find them. Elsewhere, Sith apprentice Eldon Axe flies to Dromund Kaas, having failed in a mission for Darth Kratos. She too has crossed paths with Dao Stryver, who now seems to be at odds with the Republic, Sith, and Black Sun. Stryver had encountered Eldon while she was undercover and exposed her identity as a Sith. He interrogated her for information on Lema Xandret and the Cinzia, and upon hearing this, Darth Kratos leans in intently. He abruptly rises and summons her to follow him. They fly to a compound for data storage, where Eldon then learns that Lema Xandret was a droid maker who had been targeted for termination by the Sith. Though not Force sensitive, she had given birth to a child with the power deemed to potentially become a Sith. Lema tried to hide the child, but it was taken and she fled into hiding. Stunningly, Kratos then reveals that Lena is Eldon's mother. Kratos lifts a block on Eldon's mind, having conditioned her to entirely forget her past before she became a Sith. But memories of that time elude her, and she has no memory of her mother. She and Kratos head to the Minister of Intelligence, where they deem it a top priority to find Lema before Darth Striver can, his goals remaining a mystery to the Sith. The Minister then reveals that the Hutts have obtained something valuable from a ship called the Cinzia, which also turns out to be Eldon's birth name. Meanwhile, Ula V works as an Imperial spy embedded within the Republic, serving as a senior assistant to Supreme Commander SWTOR. Presently, Grandmaster Theron Shan asks for an audience with SWTOR. She brings news of the sighting of Darth Striver, and concerns that Mandalore may be regrouping his forces for an attack on Coruscant. Ula is interested upon hearing of the Cinzia and Lema Xandret as well, and is ordered by SWTOR to investigate the incident further. He later meets with a companion, who tells him how the Hutts found the Cinzia and are now trying to sell whatever they found on the ship. Ula wonders if it pertains to an unclaimed mineral-rich world, which would be extraordinarily beneficial for the Republic or the Empire. He calls his superiors on Dromund Kaas, and is ordered to keep a close eye on the developing events. Elsewhere, Laren waits in the Senate Gardens, where she had agreed to meet with Shigar after he spoke with Theron Shan. Shigar returns, having been ordered to go to the court of crime lord Tassa Barish to learn more about the Cinzia. He offers Laren the chance to come with him to Hutta. Meanwhile, Eldon, Axe, and Darth Kratos appear before the Dark Council to argue for a strike on Hutta. Eldon is volunteered to infiltrate Tassa Barish's court by Kratos, who she has by now grown to hate. Kratos asks for an entire division of the Sith military, as he believes there is a colony on the Hidden World composed of fugitives from the Empire. Darth Howell of the Council approves of the mission, saying it presents an opportunity to make a definitive example of those who have defied the Empire. It will also be a test of Eldon's loyalty to the Sith as well. And on Coruscant, Ula is also sent to Hutta by SWTOR as an official envoy of the Republic. SWTOR does not want the Jedi to become involved, and gives orders for Ula to report back to him if anything goes awry. The Republic has also prepared a fleet for the protection of the world as well, and Ula is told he will depart immediately. The separate parties thus depart for Hutta. Shigar and Laren are disguised as bounty hunters, and land on the planet to make their way to Tassa Barish's palace. Eldon, meanwhile, arrives as an official emissary of the Sith and is escorted to the palace. She is greeted by the Hutt matriarch, and with several others is shown a recording of the Cinzia's final moments. A Twi'lek guide shows the party a melted navicomputer and another object made of an alloy of two rare metals. It is of an utterly foreign design, and its purpose is completely unknown to the Hutts and Eldon. Ula also meets with Barish, and notices Jet Nebula on the grounds, who he is told has gained the favor of the matriarch. He later receives an invitation from Jet for a drink in a cantina. There, Ula learns Jet was the pilot who found the Cinzia. However, Ula slowly becomes drunk and soon senses something is off. His security detail then collapses, and as he rises, Darth Striver appears. He leads Ula and Jet away at Blaster Point. Meanwhile, Laren and Shigar continue to scope out the palace grounds. They infiltrate the luxury quarters, destroying several security droids and killing Hope guards along the way. Laren and Shigar find their way to the rooms of the two envoys, and come across a knocked-out security detail in Ula's rooms. Eldon Axe, in the meantime, has spotted no sign of the Jedi in the Republic envoy. She plants several explosive charges, to act as distractions for her to break into the vault and steal the mysterious artifact. She sets them off, then arrives at the vault to find its external security systems deactivated. Eldon then senses a Jedi approaching in the Force, and moves quickly to melt through the door. Elsewhere, Darth Striver ties down Ula and Jet in a palace dining room. Ula confesses his role for the Republic, but Jet remains unbothered by the towering Mandalorian looming over him. Unknown to them, Laren has discovered that Jet and Ula have been abducted by Stryver and now looks to find them and battle the Mandalorian. She and her team find Ula and Jet, but Stryver escapes through the ceiling and races towards the vault with the artifact and navicomputer. Meanwhile, Shigar breaks into the vault and encounters Eldon. She taunts him and they duel. Though Shigar is stronger, Eldon is more cunning and able to dance away from his attacks. Then, a thud comes from the door, distracting Shigar. Eldon blasts him with energy, then moves to slash him in the throat. He falls back, and they both hear over Shigar's comm that Dao Stryver is on the way. Eldon becomes disarmed, and then stumbles back as the Mandalorian appears behind her. The wreckage of the vault begins to draw attention, and soon Hutt forces and Ula, Jet, and Laren arrive at the scene. They hear the faint hum of lightsabers in the Mandalorian jetpack. At the same time, Shigar, Eldon, and Stryver face off in the smoking room. The Jedi and Sith spring into action, attacking Stryver. Shigar is hit with a glancing blow from a disruptor and is thrown into a wall. Eldon tries to lunge at him with a knife, but Dao Stryver flies up with his jetpack and fires several missiles at her. She is saved at the last moment by Shigar as Hutt security forces arrive and see the vault door glowing, melted away entirely. Shigar also notices a newcomer, a 2-meter high droid with thin limbs and a hexagonal body. It screams an eerie phrase, "We do not submit to your authority," one that was uttered to Jet when he captured the Cinzia. The strange droid opens fire, sending out darts of blue fire. Another droid emerges, then another. As they shoot into the room, Shigar yells for everyone to flee. Laren finds Yama, the top aide of the Hutt, and orders him to find heavier artillery. The droids wreak havoc on the security forces, and Jet comes to believe that Lema Xandret may have been involved with the droids, which he now calls hexes. Eldon, who had been knocked out when the droids opened fire, wakes up in the firefight with her head throbbing and a burning anger in her. She falls upon the droids with a flurry of attacks, demanding to know who they answer to. But the hexes are highly adaptable and have a counter for all her assaults. The battle rages on, and a wall nearly collapses on Jet and Ula, but they are saved by Shigar. One of the hexes escapes, and Stryver is able to disable another. Shigar finishes it off and helps kill the last hex. Meanwhile, Laren returns to the vault, where she investigates the silver cylinder inside. It opens up, releasing another hex. However, the hex is newer and incomplete, and is more easily destroyed. The artifact seems to be a compact droid factory, and as she calms Shigar, Eldon appears and cuts off her fingers. She demands to be given the navicomputer, but Laren does not have it and insists it is missing. Ula looks on from his hiding place and sees the case containing the navicomputer on the ground near him. He grabs it but surrenders it to Eldon to save Laren's life. However, Stryver ropes the box towards him. He flees, and an enraged Eldon chases after him. The lower levels of the palace begin to collapse around her, and the Mandalorian escapes her once again. An idea strikes Eldon, and she runs back to the ruins and finds the remains of a destroyed hex. She takes it back to the Imperial shuttle and takes to the skies, destroying the Republic ship as she leaves Hutta. Shigar, meanwhile, is brought before an enraged Tassa Barish, who accuses him of being a Sith thief. News reaches him of his shuttle's destruction, and he uses this to leverage his case to be released. Shigar asks he be allowed to leave to hunt Dao Stryver in exchange for passing on the information of the hidden world to the Hutt first. Elsewhere, Laren theorizes with Jet that the factory was somehow planning to be bought by a party, upon which it would release the hexes it built to take over the ship and return to their place of origin. She believes they may be able to find the homeworld without the navicomputer, as she and Jet meet up with Shigar again. As for Ula, he is in an office in the palace and worries his cover as an Imperial agent has been blown. The destruction of the Republic shuttle has only worsened things, but surprisingly, he is introduced to Shigar and is reunited with Jet and Laren. The four will search for Stryver and the Hex homeworld in Jet's ship Aruga Fire. To find out where to head next, Shigar, a native Kifar, attempts to use his psychometric abilities on the Hex remains to determine its history. He is unsure of success, for his ability is unreliable at best. He calls Theron Shan and brings her up to date on the hexes and the emergence of the Sith. His master warmly encourages him to try his abilities as the rest of the crew settle in. Meanwhile, Eldon Axe flies to Kant, where a portion of Darth Kratos' force lies in wait. She orders a droid tech to find the hexes' homeworld, and as she leaves is struck by Kratos from the shadows. He is furious at her once more, but upon learning of the droid's nature lets her go. Eldon reaffirms her allegiance to her master, but deep inside vows that one day vengeance will come. Shigar tries unsuccessfully for a time to apply his powers to the inert factory they took from Hutta. Then, he picks it up and squeezes it in his fist, letting the force run naturally through him. Blood is drawn, and Shigar is suddenly transported through a twisting, dark falling maze of visions. He sees Lema Xandret, and the world she settled in that the droids are trying to find their way back to. Elsewhere, the droid tech on Kant is able to break into Eldon's hex, and finds a series of coordinates leading to somewhere in the mid-rim. Mystifyingly, the computer she inputs them into displays nothing there but a black hole. On the Auriga Fire, the travel companions deduce they must head for Sabaton, a planet that is in extremely close proximity to a black hole. Upon arriving, they also detect the presence of 15 Republic ships, summoned by Ula and sent by Supreme Commander Stantors. Sabaton itself is a small, unassuming world, and then Theron Shan arrives in her cruiser Corellia. She broadcasts a message to Xandret and her colony below, but receives no response. Chet detects several hotspots of activity on the planet as a voice suddenly replies they have no leader and wish to be left alone. They believe it to be the voice of Xandret, and several missiles suddenly rise out of the atmosphere. The Republic ships analyze the incoming projectiles, and are horrified to discover they are releasing full clouds of the hexes, which are aimed to latch onto the ships. The Corellia is attacked and almost instantly overrun, just as the Imperial fleet headed by Darth Kratos arrives. The Sith, however, are unaware of the true threat, and only see the Republic ships in disarray. Kratos looks to seize the moment and declare their intentions to claim the world to Xandret below. Eldon leads out a squadron of starfighters and discovers the storm of hexes as more missiles rise up from Sabaton. She urges her master to pull back and reassess, but Kratos has overestimated the might of the Sith and disregards the hexes as any serious threat. Several Republic ships have by now been taken over completely by the hexes and charged directly at the Sith fleet. Portions of both the Republic and Sith fleets withdraw to a safe distance, but Grandmaster Theron Shan has gone missing. She then reaches out to Shigar in the Force, and he is able to find her and prepares to bring her back to the Auriga Fire. Satil reveals the hexes can be turned into a complacent state if not openly attacked. They return to Shigar's crew, and then a new ship arrives. Satil personally hails it, for it is the vessel of Dao Striver. Striver then asks to meet with them on a nearby moon. Shigar, Satil, and Ula head out to meet the Mandalorian. Additionally, the Sith were hailed by Striver and in turn set Eldon Axe at the behest of Darth Kratos. Once she arrives, Striver reveals to everyone that the colony, somehow, is only 3 weeks old, dating back to when the Cinzia was destroyed. He then tells them he believes Lema Xandret is dead, and that once the hexes are able to leave Sabaton they will overwhelm the galaxy in less than a generation. Striver had been sent by Mandalore to assess whether Lema at the time posed a threat, and also reveals that she had sought out Mandalore to help her strike against the Sith. Sabaton below is filled with hotspots that are actually factories producing thousands of the hexes, and though Lema Xandret is dead, her legacy lives on in them. The droids will always view the Jedi and Sith as enemies, and thus, for the threat to be extinguished, Sabaton and every hex must be destroyed. The Jedi and Sith are hesitant to work together, but to save them all, Ula decides now may be the time to reveal his true affiliations. He asks Eldon to take him to Darth Kratos so he can try to convince the Sith to reassess the fight. Kratos is unmoved, but sees an opportunity to work with Theron Shan and then betray her and claim the ruins of Sabaton once the hexes have been dealt with. After agreeing to spare Laren, who Ula has begun to develop feelings for, he sends Ula and Eldon back to Striver and the others. A plan is formulated to land on the surface and destroy the hexes once and for all. The Jedi and Sith fleets merge, and Laren prepares for the drop alongside Shigar and Eldon. However, as the operation commences, Shigar's transport becomes raided by hexes. Nonetheless, they are able to fight them off, and all the Jedi and Sith land on the surface safely. Eldon drops into a strange street with buildings that seem to be under construction. She is fighting alongside Theron Shan, while Shigar is accompanying Darth Kratos. Several hexes surge towards them, but are all cut down. They move towards several canyons as a transport crashes nearby. The ground shakes, and cracks spread to reveal a river of lava. In the skies above, the hexes form orbital defenses of sorts, with new weapons unleashing hell on the Sith and Republic fleets. As the battle rages on, the enmity between the Jedi and the Sith forces resurfaces, and distrust begins to threaten to fracture the alliance. Shigar has a tense confrontation with Kratos, where the Sith Lord tries to turn him to the dark side. A monstrous, enormous creature then rises from the lava, stopping the fight. It lets out a bellow as Shigar begins to worry he has been tainted by the dark, for he knows his master has tremendous powers of foresight, yet had never warned him of this great trial. The galaxy is painted in black and white, he realized, feeling the truth and certainty of it deep in every bone. But from far enough away, it all looks gray. Meanwhile, Eldon and Satil discover the massive creature is actually a ship of sorts, and that the red liquid it is submerged in is the same biological fluid in the hexes. They manage to find a way into the ship, and come across a Bacta tank with more opaque red fluid. A body stirs in it, and Eldon is stunned as she finds it to be a clone of her. It was made by Lema, who submerged it in the liquid to suppress its force abilities. The clone can control the hexes, which serve as its protectors and eyes and ears to the world. The voice of Lema hisses at it in its head, and the clone reveals that when Lema had sent out ships to the greater galaxy, she had been killed by the hexes. Satil and Eldon try to convince the clone of the danger the hexes pose, while Lema urges it to not trust them. The liquid suddenly swirls around the clone, and it cries out for help. Satil and Eldon break the tank, but the clone dies from shock upon being abruptly introduced to an oxygenated atmosphere. Eldon then moves forward and is able to claim control over the hexes for herself. Shigar and Kratos then reunite with Laren, and watch as the hexes swarm to the ship and form a bridge to the shore. Satil and Eldon emerge, and the Sith stunningly proclaims herself free from the service of Kratos. She sends the hexes at Kratos in a furious attack, and they swarm over the Sith Lord, ending his life. Eldon, then knowing a small part of her mother is still present, then steps back and allows the despairing Lema to command the hexes to fall into the lava, destroying them once and for all. Sabaton is destroyed, and the conflict over the hexes ends at last. The Jedi and Sith retreat to their respective political spheres, their temporary alliance unceremoniously ended. Dallas Driver has disappeared, and Ula reports back to the Sith with empty hands. Shigar is allowed to continue on to the Jedi trials, and expresses several growing concerns of his to the Jedi Council. He believes the Sith are on the rise while the Jedi are in danger of waning, and presses the Council to attack the Emperor instead of waiting for his move first. The Council tells him they are considering all options, and he departs to the trials on Tython with Satil Shan. Eldon Axe appears before Darth Howl, who asks her how she was able to kill Darth Kratos. She tells him of the clone and their powers, and Howl then surprisingly offers to become her new master. And elsewhere on Tatooine, Jet Nebula encounters Striver in a cantina, who turns out to actually be a woman. She has been searching for him since Sabaton, and Jet also knows she manipulated all of the events around Sabaton to goad the Republic and Sith out into battle to assess their strength. Striver, however, also wants to ensure the Jedi and Sith remain at odds, and then addresses Jet as his real name of Jeek Karen. She moves to attack him, but Karen moves like lightning and somehow knocks her out, with the patrons of the bar covering his escape. She is allowed to live, and Striver then acknowledges Karen as a worthy adversary. The Jedi Master Nagani Zo, one of the great teachers of the Order, thinks on 4 of his students, Satil Shan, Jarek Kaden, Sio Bakarn, and Bila Kiwix, all powerful Jedi who defeated the Dark Counselor Darth Malgus at the Battle of Renvar. And on Coruscant, SIS agent Theron Shan, son of Satil, interrupts a meeting between Black Sun gangsters and a Twi'lek named Tefeth, who he captures and takes prisoner. Theron later meets with his director, Marcus Trant, who assigns him to find Master Zo. It turns out Zo has been off the grid for nearly a decade, and out of respect for the teacher of his mother, Theron accepts the mission. Elsewhere, it is revealed that Darth Malgus, though heavily scarred, remains at large. She is a scientist and engineer of considerable power, and is presently on the Rorjon, a new Javelin dreadnought. She decides to hunt down Master Zoe as well, and sends her Sith Knights to find the Jedi. Along with a captive Tethys, Theron is able to find Master Zoe on the planet of Terrace. Zoe has gone partially mad, rambling about his past dealings in the war. They are attacked by Mechas' Sith Knights, captured Jedi who are grafted into machines. Theron and Zoe barely make it back to Theron's ship, where Zoe tries to convince Theron to go to the Vessela system, Imperial territory. He forcibly tries to take the controls, and Theron sedates him. It is a hard thing to do, for Zoe had been like a father to Shan when he grew up. He had tried to teach him how to become a Jedi before it was apparent that Theron had no connection to the Force. Theron comes to believe that the Empire has messed with Zoe's memories somehow, and decides to head to Port Nowhere in search of more intel. There, Zoe and Tethys distract a smuggler so Theron can hack into his ship. He is able to obtain navigation charts of Imperial space, and they are able to find their way to the Vessela system. They land on one of the remote worlds, and build a telescope to scout for any structures built by Mechas on the other planets. Theron is able to gain a view of several planets, which have all been ravaged by biological or technological means, likely the result of Mechas' experiments. Zoe then remembers something and tells him to look at the star. There they see a massive space station, which seems to be a shipyard of some sorts. Theron prepares them to immediately leave so he can report back to the SIS, but they are captured by the dreadnought Valor Prevails. Master Zoe's memories suddenly come back to him as they are tortured and interrogated by the Empire. They all learn the space station is called the Sun Razer, and it harvests the energy and matter of the star. It is revealed that 6 more are under construction, in systems specifically chosen by the Empire. These 7 systems in total were the same ones surrendered by the Republic in the Treaty of Coruscant. Zoe recalls how the slaves used to build the Sun Razer were used as test subjects for superweapons. He was one of them, posing undercover, and witnessed countless being killed as the test commenced. The trauma of the memory scarred him, and he suppressed his memories of the atrocities. Theron is shown 4 massive superweapons, including the massive battlecruiser Ascendant Spear, all constructed with the Sun Razer. Theron is offered a place in the Empire, but he declines and is thrown in with Zoe. Meanwhile, Tethys remains on their ship, having been able to hide away while Theron and Zoe were taken. While in captivity, however, Theron is able to use a cybernetic implant to release their bonds, and they reunite with Tethys. Theron then decides to try and destroy the Sun Razer by lowering its shields, which will cause it to be consumed by the sun. He splits off from Tethys and Zoe, who gives him his lightsaber. Darth Malgus, meanwhile, becomes aware of Master Zoe's presence and sends Imperial squads after him and Tethys as Theron breaks into her control room. Theron is captured as Zoe and Tethys nearly make it back to the ship. However, Imperials shoot through the door after blowing it open. Zoe sacrifices himself, pushing Tethys to the side and taking several hits and dying where he stands. Theron reveals he is the son of Theron Shan to Mechas and baits her into approaching him. He shoots her with a toxic dart and kills his guards, then disables the station's shields. The Sun Razer is destroyed, along with all of Mechas' creations except for the Ascendant Spear, and Theron narrowly makes it back to Tethys and his ship. Darth Malgus perishes in the destruction, and Theron drops Tethys off at a nearby port. He then visits Grandmaster Theron Shan and tells her of Master Zoe's death. However, Theron does not tell her his name, keeping his identity of her son a secret.